That was What the Moon Said by Maya de Vitry off her latest release, Adaptations, which was produced by Dan Nobler. With me today at Analog in Nashville, Maya de Vitry. Greetings, comrade.
Thanks. Nice to be
Welcome.
here.
Good to have you. Um, you grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Started playing in bands pretty early, 18 or something like that. Teenager. Before that.
My first experience playing music was mostly in the orchestra.
Okay.
So it was mostly school orchestra,
Okay.
playing violin. And then I started putting bands together at the Appalachian String Band Music Festival, which we all call Clifftop in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And they have a neo-traditional band contest there. So some of my siblings and some of our friends would put little bands together. This is when we were like 15, 16.
That's like the November Project and that back in that era.
Yeah.
All right. You had a number of bands back then, and then 2010 landed in the Straybirds with Oliver Craven and Charlie Munch.
Charlie Minch.
Okay. You guys packed a lot into like consistent touring, 2 EPs, 4 albums in 8 years. That is a lot, but let's pick the story up there. So last summer, the band officially disbanded, but you had kind of already wandered into this solo project, right? So had you originally envisioned doing both, or was the band was that an inevitable dissolution?
I think that I originally envisioned being a solo artist when I was about 18 and 19, and I just wanted to be a songwriter. Okay. I hadn't really thought about, what that would mean as far as making records and touring yet, but I just wanted to write songs. And so I just funneled it very specifically into the Straybirds for a number of years. And when this project kind of resurfaced and there were songs that they just kind of refused to live in that world, and they were teaching me things and pulling me out of that world and asking me to do something else. And I didn't think that I couldn't imagine until the span of time between when the band publicly made an announcement and we privately had the decision was only a matter of weeks. And in that time, it was, it just making, while I was making Adaptations, and then the year that followed as, co-writing the last Straybirds record, we started to realize we needed to change the pace and change the way that we toured, but I think I realized that what I was asking for and what I needed, it wasn't gonna work. Like they weren't meant to live in the same time.
Square peg, round hole kind of thing. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say I liked the Straybirds fine, but when I saw you played a solo show here in Nashville at the 5 Spot last January, and I was blown away. And I wasn't the only one who felt that way from the first time we heard this new batch of solo songs. So what's that feel like to be on the inside of finally getting to that point that you just said you envisioned since you were very young?
It's extremely complicated. I think that part of what, even in the last couple of months, like part of what I was dealing with when that band ended was this idea that was my entire identity musically, and that was also like all that I had of value in society. Like that was the way I earned money. That was what I did with my time. It's, I'd be walking around a festival and people would be like, "Oh, hey, Straybirds girl, hi." Like, I didn't have a musical identity outside of that. And it was,
Right.
there was, for several reasons. It was a really complicated dynamic that kind of kept me from playing outside of that band. It was like there was a wall around that band, and that we just
Right.
sort of played within the band.
Sure.
And so it's definitely, it's hard when you're in a situation and then you feel something that physically and emotionally feels like you need to like get to a different place, but in order to like get to that place, you actually have to do something. You have to leave something, or you have to rearrange things.
You have to let something go to make space for the new.
Yeah. So now, like coming into this, and releasing this album, I feel much more strongly that this is not like it is my voice, and these are my songs, but I feel much less that this is my identity, or this is who I am, or this is why I am a legitimate like person or something. Like I don't care. Like it's cool that I'm doing it and that I'm making it, but I don't ever want to reach that point where I feel like
this is all you are.
This is all that I am. Yeah, like I feel like I have a healthier relationship with creativity and myself, and I care like so much about what I'm writing and what I'm singing, but I also like need to take care of myself, and I'm a human like outside of this, even if I couldn't sing or play or anything. I think there's so much there's so much pressure in the music scene to like have something to show for yourself at like every moment, and I don't know. I can't keep up with that. Like that's not sustainable for me personally.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this record looks both inward and outward. And I know you did a lot of personal explorations inward and outwardly. You went to Cuba. Did you also go to Central or South America, or am I making that up?
Yeah, I've been there a couple times actually. When I was 16, I went to Nicaragua for the first time. It was a delegation of teenagers with a project called Witness for Peace that first established a presence in Nicaragua during the Contra War in the 80s, and they basically this group was taking a bunch of teenagers who had never been outside of the United States, took us to small farming villages to meet families who had lost their land due to large plantations and like large scale farming, and we learned about sweatshops and learned about saw the free trade zone, and saw what I guess just started to see like what like the real human price is of some of our conveniences and luxuries
of
here.
Capitalism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that trip really affected me. I came back from those 2 weeks in Nicaragua, and I just realized that I couldn't believe anything I was learning in high school, like at face value. And so I was a really, really dedicated student. And when I came back from that trip, I was like, I don't know, like whenever I would like learn something in school, I'd be like, I just don't know if that's really the way it is, or like what are you not telling me that's in this history book, because nobody ever told me the way people live in other places. Like I don't want to know about this. I want to know about that. Like how is that possible that like that and now
you've been to Cuba as an adult.
Yeah, so then I went to Guatemala then to study Spanish a few years later, and lived with a host family then, and then recently and relevant to this record, went to Cuba, which Obama had opened up, and there was this people-to-people visa that was really
Right.
easy to get. It was like $50, and I just kept really detailed journals the whole time I was in Cuba because Trump was inaugurated the day that I got to Cuba. So I thought, well, things could change in the next couple weeks, like just in case. I'm gonna really take this seriously and keep really good records while I'm here. I was taking music lessons. I was speaking Spanish, like trying to learn as much as I could the whole time I was there. I really took the cultural immersion seriously.
Yeah, because they do, in those cultures, they're so much more community minded, and they live so much more humbly and gratefully than Americans do, for the most part. How, I mean, you said it changed you even as a teenager. How does that kind of continue those to reverberate in you?
Um, it's I think that it's hard to explain, and it's also hard to like bridge. It's hard to explain when you come home from something like that, and it's hard to bridge the gap. Like when I first came back from that trip to Nicaragua, like I got really into dumpster diving and like ways that I could
So you were a
challenge.
freegan, and now you're an open borders advocate, and you're
Well,
just crazy.
not necessarily. I don't know. I just think that the conversation is uncreative,
Sure.
like on
Yeah.
that level. But I think I just got really upset about like the idea of waste and like my part in it and my like the inheritance of being. I started to come to peace with the inheritance of being from the United States, like in Cuba, because people, the way that I was received there and welcomed there and treated, was not as like an agent of a government, but as a human.
Right.
And that was like you can tell like when someone is seeing you as you know seeing you as a label or something. It's much different than when they're like, welcome, you're part of our family now because you ate dinner with us 4 times.
Right. Yeah.
So
And that, to tie into the record, Go Tell a Bird, I mean, that's why I jokingly called you an open borders advocate, because that song addresses those things of like, how are you going to build a wall or any other kind of border in a world where we, birds don't know these things, butterflies don't know. Talk a little about how that all of those ideas kind of found their way into this record for you.
Yeah, I think it's just an ongoing process of trying to reconcile like all these different worlds and all these different narratives. I don't know specifically that song is an address to those in power who I think like I want to like in Cuba there were many times that someone would say to me like well take as long as you need to say what you're trying to say because I want to know you. And I think if that was I guess that's to me like the overarching like one overarching theme of this record is what you can not even like accomplish but just access like when you go into any encounter with somebody like as I want to know you instead of like I clearly
what can I get from
what
you
can I get from
like
you, what do you owe me, we clearly can't speak, we clearly don't get along, but I think that the structure of our society like requires us to like have that armor and maybe not requires but just it certainly encourages that kind of armor.
Yeah, we're taught that. I mean, when I was listening to the record last week I kept thinking about that Ubuntu, the philosophy of Ubuntu, which is I am because we are, and that we're a tribe or a community or however you want to define it, and each member is as important as the other, and we're only as strong as the weakest among us. And that's a philosophy that is ancient and in force in so many cultures, but it's not here in America, and it's kind of quite the opposite. It's an every man for himself, and half the population can't even conceive of living their lives in service to the whole, the greater good. There's no question in that, but that came out of the record for me, or that's kind of what I got from it, that idea.
I think, that this is just my, I guess just my expression and my way of just trying to figure out how to live like compassionately in the place and the privilege that I've been born into.
Yeah. I felt like, and you can tell me if this is correct, I felt like there's a lot of surrender on this album as well. Did a lot of these songs just kind of come from you almost setting yourself aside and letting them come however they wanted to or needing to, and just you kind of getting still and almost just feeling and hearing your own inner wisdom coming out? Or
probably? I don't know. That's a nice word, though. Maybe that's what I was feeling that I didn't know at the time.
Surrender?
Yeah.
Yeah, could be. I mean, if it didn't feel forced.
Definitely didn't feel forced. It was, I feel like a liar to say it was effortless, because I know that I worked really hard to write these songs. But there was something effortless about parts of it too. I think things just feel more honest to me now. Like, this writing it's kind of like wide open. There's no.
Yeah. Well, that's the another old adage is the two wings of the bird: self-effort and grace. And you have to have both to fly, because you can't. One wing ain't gonna get you there. And there are birds all over this thing, so we can go with that too.
Yeah.
I also, another thing I love about the record is how different themes come up in different or the same theme will come up in different songs. Like in Wilderness, there's that line, "Time is more like a pilgrimage." And that was such a striking notion to me. And then it kind of comes around again in What the Moon Said, with "You and I are made of places and times." And to me, that defines the passing of time and aging as a very active process. It's not something that just happens to us. It's something that we need to sort of be intentional and purposeful in moving through. What sparked that for you? Did I get it right, first of all?
I feel like you know this record better than I do.
Well, you did make it
Yeah.
a while back.
Yeah.
So
let's see. About the places and times, I think I was, sometimes I get like really freaked out about the present when I like realize that it's the present. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm here, sitting here right now. There's Kelly. Like, this is the only place I can be. I can't be anywhere else. That is crazy. And like when I actually realize that, I don't know. It really overwhelms me.
okay, let's not think about that then.
So, no, I'm saying that like it overwhelms me in like an excited way.
Oh, okay.
Like that I'm I think because I'm a very dreamy person. I like, imagine, things happening, and I also, I often like, um, I kind of have a bad memory too, though, like for the past and things. Like there will just be these like very specific moments of like a specific like glance or like conversation or even just like a word or the rain that was happening at that time, like very, very specific things. And so, yeah, like when I guess just in my relationships with people, I feel like they're just made of these places and times that just like are just layered. I feel like I got really obsessed with reading about time, and I think it's like an Aboriginal Australian concept of time where they have the closest translation to English, something like the every when is like what the present is. So it's like and I actually there was this art exhibit up at Harvard one time when I was traveling through Cambridge, and so if you picture like all these like little sketches on the wall, maybe 200 sketches, and then at each like moment, like 3 or 4 of the sketches would layer on top of themselves, but just like 3 or 4 of them. So it's just symbolizing and showing this concept that like we are made of the past and the future, like because it's in our mind.
Right.
We're just made of these like slices of, it's thick. Like there's so much more going on than the present. There's these like thick
Well, like
slices.
the rings of a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just love that concept instead of like linear time. Like, okay, now we're here and that didn't happen, or that's the past. Like the past is so much like with us.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. Those lines are probably just because I'm obsessed with thinking about time and thinking about time as like a construct.
Oh, I went down a whole rabbit hole the other night of thinking, well, they didn't have years. Like there was no way to mark, like who came up with the calendar? And then I went all the way to like, well, who came up with numbers and how, I mean, if you get into like thinking about where the origins of any particular anything, it will blow your mind.
Yeah.
So
it just, I find it, I don't know. I just like to try to like reset and kind of like clear just like I felt when I was 16 and I was like, wait a second, nobody told me about that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do that like all the time. I'm like, wait, clear the table.
Yeah.
What if I didn't know about 7 days a week? Like, how would I feel right now? Why is it Tuesday? Like, what if I did, I don't know.
Why is it Tuesday?
Maybe I have a lot of free time, but that's what I think about.
Yeah. Well, another construct is language. And that's another big idea you throw out in both What the Moon Said and Anybody's Friend, that, and particularly English, I mean, it doesn't, so many words don't come close to cover it. Like love doesn't cover it, and so many words don't do their job. They don't convey what, like you'll hear, oh, there's a word in Japanese that means ba 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 ba, and you're like, oh, that's the most beautiful thing ever, and we don't have something that gets there. But we have hands and we have eyes and we have music to get the point across. Is that kind of, that's all we have sometimes. And yet language has to be a part of a song.
And I think like the joy for me is just putting the words together in a, slightly different way, and then kind of like shaping it so that I see the world like at a slightly different angle for myself. Like I'm just kind of trying to write and find, I guess, like shed light on a feeling that I have, and then maybe somebody else will see it, but they're going to be coming from their angle, so they'll see it differently too. But that's like why I love writing, is because you just get to put these words together. I think because we have limited words, then there's just, you know, you just make the little bridges and the connections between the words, and
Yeah.
and then you have a feeling.
Yeah. I think a lot about it's a topic that I end up talking a lot about is identity politics, and like the personal and the political being the same thing for so many of us. Um, and something I was reading a few weeks back was something about how if we want to, in looking at politics, if a minority candidate goes into a room, they don't actually have to talk about identity politics because they bring it with them. Um, and I just kind of thought of that as you were talking about, like in writing a song, that is your way of expressing your identity. But how are those two forces, the personal and the political, how are those things rumbling around in you, particularly on this in this collection? Are they pretty well intertwined?
I think it's just, I think it's hard to remember if I think I was like already kind of getting into this kind of thought when I was, you know, beginning the record, and certainly while writing this record, and have continued to explore it. But there's, I think it's a passage by the writer Audre Lorde, and she talks about like our like the like blueprints and like the architecture of your sort of like your body and your, that's what I think like politics are, sort of, is like the way that it's kind of like a guide for like, here's how power is distributed like outside of you, and this is how like you need to like, you're gonna fit into the power like this way. And so it's, I think like coming to consciousness that I've been affected, or that I, you know, by some of those ideas, you know, whether as a woman, or you know, just as an American, anything like, yeah, I guess just realizing that there's forces outside of my personal self that that exist. And I think to say that, yeah, like we don't exist in some void or vacuum. Like anytime that someone's like, I don't want to like talk about politics, or, you know, just talk about music, don't talk about politics, or don't. And I still like, this is very, you know, record hasn't, you know, it's coming out in a couple days, and I don't know how much I'm going to get into like talking about politics as an artist, but in some ways I'm like, well, it's inseparable. Like, what do you mean you don't want to talk about how power is distributed? Like, all around you and also within you, and how you see yourself because of what other people have decided about you before you were even born. Like, you don't want to, that doesn't,
or as soon as you walk in a room,
interest you.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I'm just surprised, because I think that maybe what people mean when they say we don't want to talk politics is like, we don't want to fight like with the script that we've been given. That sounds frustrating. Let's not do that.
Right.
And I don't want to do that either.
Right. Like, but you can't ignore it. But if you, in this day and age, in this time, if you're able to just say, I don't want to talk about politics, then you're coming, no matter who you are, you're coming from a place of extreme privilege, in that clearly your life is not affected by all that's going on.
I think it could be privilege, and I think it could also be exhaustion. Like,
or denial, or,
you know, like,
that's true.
Yeah, many things. But I think always pride in some way.
Yeah, that's probably good.
And even when we don't, you know, realize it. And the same for me. Like, I've definitely had to deal with pride in the last several months and year, like, you know, walking away from the band, walking away from my identity as like making money as a musician,
Right.
and feeling like successful, like, okay, I don't have to have a day job, or and now I work at Starbucks, I work at a corporation,
Right.
but I have cavities and I have health insurance now
Right.
for a couple months at least, and so that's what I'm, you know, that's my balance, and that's my that's how, you know,
That's a self-care move, though.
it's a self-care move,
Yeah.
and so that's how I'm existing right
Yeah.
now. You know, that's how I'm like walking this line that of being an artist in this society, and that's what I'm that's what I've come to. And so I just want to, I think that any conversation about, you know, it's not personal or political if it's just at least like knowing someone's name and like hearing some of their story, and then those like words or those structures of personal and political, or like kind of fall away a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just connection then.
Yeah.
And I think, well, nature is a big theme on this record, but there's another one in Anybody's Friend. He's saying, let's teach our children they're good enough, they're strong enough to be anybody's friend. And when I was preparing for this last week, the thing that immediately came to mind was that Gillette commercial, because which is about toxic masculinity and just men being better citizens. But my biggest takeaway from that commercial came at the end when it shows the little boy, and it's like, kids learn from watching, not just listening. They mimic what we do, and that's such a huge thing. And now, since that point, this whole thing came out over the weekend with the teenagers from Kentucky and that, and man, just every day is a new lesson, is a new teaching moment for everyone. And if we could just teach our kids that they're good enough and strong enough to both be anybody and to be anybody's friend. Hallelujah, man. Again, there's no question there. I don't know what I'm,
Yeah,
but
I think just like like reteaching the idea of strength or something.
yeah,
Like that it
takes incredible bravery to be vulnerable. And I think that for men in particular, well, I'm not a man, so I can't speak to like what men are taught, but I see, how it comes out of not being allowed to be vulnerable, not being allowed to seem quote unquote weak in those types of situations or whatever, and mob mentality. No, there's so much we could go off on a whole thing here if we wanted to, but we could also just talk about the birds on the record if we wanted to. But let's end with this. What do you feel like was the biggest growth spurt or growth moment or realization or whatever that you got from this whole process?
I think the constant thing was accepting that my instincts and my body were like walking like 10 steps ahead of me, like all the time, and like my own decision making, like my rational brain, and it was just like trying to catch up. And I guess being like, I think like returning to that and returning to like some sense of intuition and like gratitude for just myself, like as a like just like an animal wearing clothing, like that I'm okay, like that my body knows things. My body knows when things are not healthy, when things are when there's danger, maybe like emotionally, or I think just to pay attention to those signs like more confidently.
All right. We are now at the enlightening round. I'm going to list different elements of nature, and you tell me which instrument you think corresponds to that for you.
Okay.
Just for you. It's not fast, it's enlightening, not fast. Okay. Wind.
Just like any, like the flute or the clarinet, like just the like
A
breath.
wind instrument.
Yeah, a wind instrument. I don't know.
I'm easing you into it.
Yeah.
I wanted to start, Okay, let's go with the sky.
Maybe the piano.
Okay, I like that. A tree. Any kind of tree you want.
A fiddle.
Okay, I can see that. A river.
Ooh. A cello.
All right. A mountain.
The banjo.
Okay, all right. You took it in a different way than I would have gone, but of course, there's a banjo player sitting over there. Let's go with grass.
I just want to say fiddle again. But I guess I was a fiddle player for a long time.
Yeah,
Still
yeah.
am.
All right, let's end with birds. Pick any kind of bird.
Just pick a bird?
Yeah. What kind of an instrument would you?
You
You'd
want me to
rather
pick
just
a
have the
kind
real
of-
bird.
Pick a kind of bird, or
You don't have to pick a kind of bird. Just whatever comes to in your imagination.
mandolin.
All right, fair. Go sing some songs now.
Okay.
How about that?
That'll be easier.
You got this.
All right. Thanks, Kelly.
It's fine. All right. Coat's coming off. Serious.
Go tell love you wanna see her papers. You wanna see her papers. You wanna see her papers. Go tell love you wanna see her papers. And then go tell a bird about the land of the free. Go tell love she's in the wrong country. She's in the wrong country. She's in the wrong country. Go tell love she's in the wrong country. And go tell a bird about the land of the free. Go tell a bird about the land of the free. She's in the wrong country. She's in the wrong country. She's in the wrong country. Go tell love. She's in the wrong body. She's in the wrong body. She's in the wrong body. Go tell love. You wanna see her papers and then go tell a bird about the land free. Go tell a bird about the land free. There was an ocean in your eyes. I swam across to the other side. Now I'm lying beside you under your sky, and I'm seeing it all in a different light. What was I doing? Calling my stars at night without you. There was a country in your hands. We held each other's foreign lands. What was the shape of the world I was making? What was inside of the fist I was shaking? What was I doing? Calling my heart a home without you. When will the light of tomorrow see this map of the world love draws for me? Who will the morning ask me to be, now that love is the only land of the free? What was I doing? Calling my life a world without When we recorded that one, I told Dan Nobler that I wanted it to be like, I wanted to forget that we were recording and that nobody was listening, and so I just like went in the booth and we turned the lights out. So I still like go to that place anytime I sing that song. I was like, oh wow, I'm at the analog. Hi everyone. I'll start that one again. This one I wrote with Anna Eggy, really, really good friend of mine who lives in Brooklyn. I'll try to tell you how I feel, like a child. I'll try. These are words I'm learning, and the way I'm feeling is the difference between a ceiling and a sky. Just like a child, I hold these words in my fist as if they are stones. I'd throw them all back to the ocean to hold you in this story. We're both born knowing. Let's teach our children they're good enough, they're strong enough to be anybody's friend. Sometimes I cry when I open my eyes, like a child I cry. Who are these colors? They're alive. What are these lines they're trying to show me? All I see is light. All I see is light. Let's teach our children they're good enough, they're strong enough to be anybody's friend. Let's teach each other we're good enough, we're strong enough to be anybody's friend. Thanks. I'll do one more. There's an ancient wind the sailors read, every shape a wave can be, carving on the water the meaning of a dream. Will you read it to me? Will you read it to me? and breaking the bars of time. Will you show me what you find when you read me between the lines? You see when you read me between the lines of my body's a letter. Will you read it to me? My body's a letter. Will you read it to me? My body's a letter. Will you read it to me? My body's a letter. Will you read it to me? My body's a letter. Will you read it to me? Will you read it to me?
Maya de Vitry, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kelly.